Hello, we are the group presentation number 7, and we're going to present the foundations of group behavior. So first, we are Juan Bernardo Harker, Michael André Perry Oliver, Daniel Vega, and Luis Felipe Morales.
So first of all, we have to keep in mind that there's two types of groups. The first one is like the normal group, for example, the one you have with your friends. And the second one is the temporary groups, which are the ones that, for example, you use in your university to achieve a certain goal or a certain objective. There are some characteristics of this type of group. The first one is they work towards a specific goal or objective, which is the same as the university groups for any work you have. A second characteristic is they have specific deadlines. Third, that they are limited by time, as I told you before. And fourth, that they can be studied under the punctuated equilibrium model, which I'm going to tell you later. So the punctuated equilibrium model is often used to analyze how temporary groups work. For example, this model states that there are like 5 steps that every temporary group goes through. The first step is the first meeting. That, for example, remember when Sebastian told us about our groups. Here's when we said like the working direction of the group. How are we gonna work? Like state the rules and the norms we're gonna have in the group, and the behavioral patterns that we're gonna use to reach the goal. Second is the first phase of group activity, which is basically the phase we all have that we say like, oh no, we have a lot of time before the deadline, so we're gonna do nothing. So you just stand still and wait for the time to pass. Then the third phase is like the transition phase, which is a phase when the group realizes that the deadline is really close and they start implementing like the first working directions they set in the first meeting. So they start working towards the objective. Then is the fourth major change phase, which is, for example, when you after you start doing the third phase, you do the fourth phase when you start taking all these like methodologies you're going to use and start making the work and making sure that everything you said in the beginning of the first meeting is being done, and you try to make new plans that you're gonna approach in the following weeks. And the fifth and the final work phase is when you look backwards towards all the plan you have done during the semester or the work or the deadline, and you realize that there's something missing, so it's like a correcting phase to make sure that everything's done. So as I told you before, the temporary groups are really important because they have 6 main properties that can improve the performance, and you have to make sure that they all work together in order to make the best out of the group. So the first thing is the roles. What are the roles? So the roles are expected behavior patterns attributed to someone in a social unit. So what this means is that there are 2 kind of role that we have. So the first one is role perceptions, which is how I think I should be acting in a certain situation. So for example, if I'm doing a really important meeting or a really important talk, for example, a TED talk, I should be using the best language I can, like the academic language, to be well dressed, to be well presented, because that's how I think that I should be acting in this situation specifically. Then we have the role expectations, which is how my partners or my peers think that I should be acting in a given context. So it's like the other perception. So they have a different perception from me, but the role is still the same. So the second property that we found really important in order to improve group performance are norms. All groups should be establishing norms before working, and this is something that Sebastian told us since the first day, and we actually did it. Remember, with the group cases, we established some norms and some rules of how are we going to work. For example, we have performance norms of what's going to be like the quality of the job, the standards of the job we're going to present. Second, we have appearance norms, which in this case they wouldn't apply because there are like dress codes or certain unspoken language that you can talk about it or not talk about it. And then the last one, which was really important, for example, for this project and different groups I've had throughout my university life, are the resource allocation norms, which can be explained as, for example, if you divide the work you are going to do, to make sure that that's clear, the norms are clear. For example, if you're going to do the editing of the video, make sure that's established. If you're going to do the graphics of the PowerPoint presentation, make sure that's established so that you can avoid problems in the long term. And this established norm can also avoid deviant workplace behavior. What's this? This basically refers that some members of the group will not perform as the level of the group or how the rest of the group is doing. So that really threatens the well-being of the group and can be really influential of the final objective. So the third property that is really important are status. What are status? They define positions or ranks given to group members, and they are really highly related to roles. But we don't, for example, for this kind of works, for presentations or college essays, we don't recommend you to have a status because that's gonna give someone more power of making decisions. So that we don't recommend it because that can lead to discussions and to, as I told you before, deviance workplace behavior. This status can be determined by different factors. So the first one, how the power of a person wields over others, and some of the status are just given by the personal characteristics of a person. However, as I told you, it's not recommendable in this type of groups to set a status, to set like a hierarchy, because we think that it's better that everyone can contribute to a group in order to work towards the goal. Here is the fourth of the properties of a group to improve performance, and is the size. So you always have to keep in mind when you're going to work towards an objective that is assigned, or a task that is assigned to you. If you're going to make a group, you have to keep in mind the size of the group in order to be productive and to achieve the goal as quickly as possible with the highest quality. So the group size also should be really thought about it, because it is important to reduce social loafing. What is social loafing? So social loafing is when someone of the group, for example, starts to work with less intensity because he thinks that the rest of the group is going to do the work for him. So he's kind of a free rider. So you have in your mind that if we're working in a task, I don't have to work as hard as I should be doing it alone. So to keep the size of the group specific to the goal, is really important to avoid these kind of behaviors. These kind of behaviors can also be prevented through different norms and roles. As I told you before, the norms are really important as the performance roles and the high for the quality of the job. So here is the fifth of the properties for a group, for the foundation of a group, which is cohesiveness. And this is really important because this is one of the ones that can affect the productivity of a group the most, because it's highly related to the motivation of the members. And when we talk about motivation of the members, we have to keep in mind that the motivation of one member can affect the motivation of the rest of the group. So it's really important to make sure that everyone of the group is the group has a really high cohesiveness, to make sure that they work as a group and not as individuals. How can this be improved? This can be improved in different ways. For example, as I told you before, the size of the group is really important to make sure that the cohesiveness is the best. So you can make the group smaller or bigger depending on the needs you have in your group. It depends of every specific group. For example, you can encourage agreements with group goals. As I told you, the norms can also be really important to affect the cohesiveness of a group. And you can, for example, what I used to do with my friends in other groups, in other works, is to increase the time I spend with them so that our relation improves, and it's not only a group members relationship, but a friends relationship. And this is really going to affect the way that the group performs and the productivity it has. Finally, the sixth of the properties that has every group is diversity. I may recognize this from your groups in the university, because diversity is not only cultural or religious or sex. It can be also the different thoughts or everything that is not common to you or that is not the same as you. So diversity, why is it important for group performance? Because at the beginning, if there's no respect for diversity, it tends to increase group conflict in the short term. However, in the long term, it can help to solve problems in unique ways, because everyone will have like a different thought or a different way of doing things, and working as a group in common, you can realize that probably the thing you were thinking about it wasn't the best option at all. For example, remember the exercise or like the game we did with Sebastian when we were in a boat and we were lost and we had to choose. I think it was between 15 items, and to see which one was the most important for us, and and I think pretty much every one of us realized that after we did it in groups, we got a much better decision as we did but as an individual. So this is why it's important to respect diversity, to improve group cohesiveness, and to take better decisions.
Now, talking about the composition of the group at the university, there are four factors that must be taken into account. The first one are the abilities. Part of the performance of the group depends on the skills and knowledge of each of the members, but these abilities also set the limits of each member. These limits are solved and covered by the abilities of the other members. That's why the abilities of each of the members are important while choosing how to compose our groups. Secondly, is personality. Once again, we see how the personality is important for the group work. Teams with high levels of consciousness and openness usually perform better. Now, the roles are also a vital part of the composition of the team. The teams have different needs, and it's important to assign the correct member to fulfill each of these needs. As we can see, each of the members have something to apport to the team, and the other members potentialize each previous input. Finally, we have the size of the team. The size of the team is also important for the composition because depending on the size, the effectiveness can grow or decay. There are also some recommendations for the processes of the teams or groups. The first one is having a common plan and a purpose. Now, under this situation of quarantine, this point could be the most important because when we meet and work, somehow we get it done. But now it's different, and defining what needs to be done and how it's crucial. Secondly, it is defining specific goals. Specific goals favor a good communication and also maintain the focus on getting the result that the group wishes or needs. There is a important point for the motivation that is believing that the goal will be achieved. Believing that we can achieve the goal that we've set previously basically raises the motivation, which many times is important while working in the university, where many of us feel a lack of motivation, even now under the situation that we live actually. And finally, there is a very important point that is finding the perfect balance of conflict. Many times, we tend to believe that having conflict in a group might affect the performance of the group, but it's important to have the perfect amount of conflict because this opens a debate and many times it improves the ideas that we have for reaching certain goal, um, or makes the group more flexible in case there's one problem with the plan. the group could adjust to this problem and keep going. So, in other words, too much conflict and disagreement make that the performance of the team decay.
Now we're going to discuss how to improve group performance in the university according to the properties set in the beginning of the presentation. So first of all, to improve the group performance in the university, we can share our opinions. If everyone shares their opinions, they're going to have a point of view, a better point of view. Secondly, to discuss the ideas. If everyone shares the opinions and they discuss those ideas, they're going to get better results. They also can set roles, set norms, and set status for a better organization. Also, we can talk about the advantage of work group. So, according to the last ideas of improved group work in performance in the university, we can get better results, better decisions, more points of view, less mistakes. And for example, we can discuss about the case of the shipwreck that we took in class, that Sebastian told us, that we can show that if we talk about the ideas we have and we share those ideas, we're going to have better results.
First, a work group. It's a group that interacts primarily to share information and make decisions to help each member perform within his or her area of responsibility. On the other hand, a work team generates positive synergy through coordinated effort. The individual efforts result in a level of performance greater than the sum of those individual inputs. So, we have four types of work teams. Problem-solving teams. These teams are put together to solve problems, but lack the authority to make decisions. Their work is to recommend. Second, self-managed work teams. They're a group of employees who perform highly related or interdependent jobs and take on many of the responsibilities of the former supervisors. They don't only solve problems, but implement solutions and take responsibility for outcomes. Third, cross-functional teams. Cross-functional teams made up of employees from about the same hierarchical level but different work areas who come together to accomplish a task. Cross-functional teams are an effective means to allowing people from diverse areas within or even between organizations to exchange information, develop new ideas, solve problems, and coordinate complex projects. Fourth, virtual teams. Virtual teams use computer technology to unite physically dispersed members and achieve a common goal. Team effectiveness model. First, teams differ in form and structure. Second, the model assumes teamwork is better than individual work. We can organize the key components of effective teams into a team effectiveness model. It's composed by a context, a composition, and a process. So first, context. What factors determine whether teams are successful? First, adequate resources, leadership and structure, climate of trust, and performance evaluation and reward systems.